I'm Victoria Cuming, Head of Policy in Europe, Middle East and Africa at Bloomburg New Energy Finance. We provide research to governments and investors about renewable energy across the world.
And how is Africa doing in terms of having an energy supply that cuts down its carbon footprint compared to other global regions?
Several countries are doing well in terms of ramping up their energy supply. So, for example, Kenya and some of the smaller countries. And they're also taking into account climate change. They're taking care to reduce their carbon footprint and to reduce emissions. That said, most of the countries, they are also taking into account, and probably greater account of development priorities. So the importance of economic growth and the resulting impact on power demand and the need to reach that power demand and meet it.
And in quite a number of cases, meeting that energy supply has involved coal.
Yes, that's right. So there are several countries, so Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, are all introducing coal into their energy supply, which is something we're not seeing in developed countries elsewhere in the world.
And in a slightly contradictory way, Kenya has actually passed legislation about carbon footprint and renewable energy.
Absolutely. It recently implemented its climate change bill, which aims to increase funding into mitigation and adaptation projects.
So which African countries are doing better than others in your opinion?
In my opinion, Kenya is doing well. It's devising its energy strategy. It's got its energy bill, which it's hoping to pass this year, although that's taken a few years to get ready. And it's actually implementing it. It's focusing on geothermal to make use of its natural resources. In some countries, such as Nigeria, the progress is slower, especially in terms of renewable energy. So they, having said that, have been going through one of the most ambitious power sector reforms in the whole world, and that has involved privatization of the power sector and splitting up the value chain into its various elements of generation and distribution, etc.
And will that privatization slow down any emphasis on reducing carbon footprint, or is it equally amenable, as it were, to that kind of policy?
The power sector reform in itself is unlikely to slow down that, but what it's done is taken the government's focus away from implementing renewable energy. So Nigeria has yet to pass its first dedicated renewable energy piece of legislation, but it should do so this year.
What are the sources of finance for sustainable energy in Africa?
For sustainable energy, Sub-Saharan Africa at least it still relies on development finance, so the World Bank, the African Development Bank. We're seeing some smaller development banks, such as South Africa's increasing its role, and in some more mature markets, such as South Africa and Kenya, we are seeing the role of non-concessional finance increase.
What are the bigger deals that will be implemented in the next 3 to 5 years?
So that's difficult to say precisely. There are some big deals on the horizon. So, for example, in Ethiopia, there's a 1 gigawatt Korbeti geothermal project, which should be financed in the next few years, probably in smaller parcels. There are some 1 gigawatt plus wind farms also in South Africa that are also planned.
And how optimistic are you about the continent, particularly Sub-Saharan Africa, reducing its carbon footprint in a 5 to 10 year period?
Well, in a way, Sub-Saharan Africa is in a more difficult position than, say, China. So China is going from a very high baseline, so it's easier to get the big percentage reductions in its emissions, whereas Sub-Saharan Africa has actually very low emissions. So in a way, it's more difficult to get those percentage decreases. That said, although I have said that some countries are implementing coal, there's also massive increases in small-scale solar across the continent, and so that will have an impact on its carbon footprint.
But will the small-scale solar be other than 5 to 10% marginal contribution, or is it much larger than that?
It could be much larger. We're currently doing our 2040 market outlook at the moment, which should be released at the end of next month, and then I'll be able to give you a concrete figure of exactly the share of small-scale solar.